Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our July webinar. I'm really excited about today's conversation. We'll be talking about keys to an effective technology strategy, and we timed this leading up to our technology showcase, which is coming up in just a few weeks on August 10th. So a few housekeeping notes before we get started. As usual, we'll record the conversation, and a recording of that will be available on our website and also circulated via email. Everyone's lines will be muted just to keep things orderly, but today we really want to make this interactive. So if you have questions, comments as we go, please do type those into the chat box, and we'll make sure that we cover them as we go. We usually save questions to the end, but today we really want to make this conversational, so please do send those in, and we will have some extra time at the end, I expect, to cover anything else that might occur to you to discuss as we go. I'm Dave Hodgins. I run the LA Better Buildings Challenge, and I'm really excited to have Sarah F. from one of our great partners, Kilroy, really on the line today, and it is her birthday, so that is the level of dedication that this woman has to this topic. So thank you again, Sarah, for making the time. Before we started, just a little more context. I mentioned we have our Building Technology Showcase. This is the 6th year we've been doing this. Pretty exciting. Coming up August 10th. You see the logistics there, and we'll have a registration link at the end. We have great fast pitch presentations lined up from companies recommended by our LABBC partners. And so you all are a huge resource of collective expertise, and knowing what's worked where, what you all are interested in, really makes this timely and relevant. So very excited about the presentations this year. As I mentioned, we surveyed our partners, so thanks to all of you for making those referrals. These are going to be fast pitch, like we've done the last few years, so 3 minutes. The presenter will cover what is technology, what's its application in the context of an existing building, what are features and benefits, both energy or water and non-energy or water benefits, because it goes beyond savings, of course. What are the nuts and bolts in terms of installation and training that's involved? How does it go in? How do you actually use it? How do you prove up the savings? And then case studies. So again, these presenters were recommended by our LABBC partners, and so they've done projects here. They know how to work in LA. They know how to work with our utilities and in builds like yours. So it's very quick, very rapid fire, and there will be time for working. So if you see something that looks interesting to you, you can actually grab some cards and make it a productive day, quick download on some cool ideas that you might look at. New this year, and I'm really excited about this, is our expert panels made up of LABBC partners, owners who are really leading the way in this field. Sarah, of course, who's on the line today, and 4 of our other partners. We're going to split these into 2 panels, and it's going to be a great discussion. So it'll break up the fast pitch presentations a little bit, and should make for a fun day. So with that, I'd like to introduce our featured speaker today, Sarah Neff. She's Vice President of Sustainability at Kilroy. Kilroy is really, technically is the #1 in terms of the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, or GRESB. For those who aren't familiar with GRESB, it's really the eminent sort of reporting platform that a lot of the global real estate investment companies, REITs, into, and this goes beyond just energy and water efficiency, but gets into all kinds of sustainability metrics, and gives a real apples-to-apples comparison across different property types and sectors. And so we're very lucky to have Sarah here today to talk about how they go about this, because of course technology and their process for selecting, deploying, measuring, and actually getting the impact is a big part, I think, of how they got that #1 spot. So that Sarah, I just have, a few questions for you, and again, folks, please do type in anything that you'd like to ask Sarah or me, or points that you think would be interesting to discuss as we go here. So, just to kind of frame things at a high level, and then we can get into like more specifics. But how does it work at Kilroy? So, what's kind of the Kilroy model?
So the Kilroy model is that there's a dedicated sustainability budget. Oh, and before I go for it, I should say we're #1 in North American office per GRES. The best actually companies in the world are Australian, and I highly recommend if anybody has a chance to head over and see what our friends down under are doing. I steal all my best ideas from them. So
thanks for clarifying.
We have a dedicated sustainability budget. And it is, as for purposes of this call, for payback projects, energy and water efficiency projects that meet a payback of 3 years or less. And I can get into why that is. Oddly, I also had charging station installations under my budget, as well as certifications and anything related to that. So LEED, Fitwell, all that stuff. 3 basic of projects. And so, my teams go out, my engineers go out, asset managers, myself, through obviously things like the technology showcase, where I've definitely found projects. We find projects, it's a bit of a matchmaking thing to pair them up with the right building, because we find that specific technologies are really best suited to specific types. Some are great for towers, some are great for hilltop. It really depends on the utility, that kind of thing. And, we hammer out a proposal with incentives. It has to meet a 3 payback. We ask that the vendors do any of the incentive work. It is not because I'm lazy, but because we find that unless the vendors are taking the risk of the incentives just often don't materialize. And then we deploy. And you're lucky, we usually I'll just call him, which is also been an LABBC pitcher for, and they do our measurement and verification. So that's how at the end we're finding out if our projects work. So in a nutshell, that's how it works at Kilroy.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And I'm sure there will be more questions will come up about that. So that's how it works now, and you've been at Kilroy for years now. So what
It'll be 8 years. Can you believe it or not?
Years.
Next month. I'm so old.
Wow, me too, because I think we've known each other this whole time.
Yeah.
So what was it like when you got there? I mean, already, definitely a leader, but not, at where it is now in terms of what we're talking about today. So what was it when you started?
Right. When I started, I didn't have a dedicated sustainability budget, and this was really key. So what would happen is the concerns were more or less the same. We didn't have, electric vehicles weren't as popular then, and we certainly didn't have nearly as many LEED or Fitwell buildings. I was sort of hired to deal with the LEED process. But what would happen is that I would do all that project sourcing, but then we would have to ask asset managers to make allocations in the budgets that they submitted to the senior operations team. And so I would, spend a lot more time internally pitching. And that's tough because, everybody at Kilroy has always had the best intentions, but sustainability is it's never an emergency, right? Like I have a spec suite and lease up this building right now. The asphalt is cracking. I have to redo the lobby. I mean, those are the things that a capital budget is really designed for. And so it was hard. Projects that were great would get cut, and I understand because more emergencies came up. But that is, so that was the original model.
Having that dedicated budget meant that great projects would get put to the side to emergencies, basically things that have to be done,
exactly.
That come up inevitably in the course of running a building. Yeah. I had a question come up just going back to the previous, something you said during the previous part. I'll go ahead and ask it now. When you're looking at the 3-year payback, and you mentioned incentives, Do rebates and incentives factor into that 3-year payback?
Very much so. So rebates and incentives are critical, and that is often what gets projects below 3-year payback. So we spend a lot of our time chasing incentive dollars to bring our projects under, because it's difficult projects to meet that 3-year requirement without it. And I just want to explain why we didn't take 3 years out of thin air. It's because we have green leases at Tilray. In fact, we've been a green lease leader since 2014, and we just got green lease leaders gold level this year. And the function of a green lease is to recover your capital into an efficiency project over a short period of time, in our case, a payback period. But leases roll on average every 5 years, and you don't tend to do upgrades like when tenants move in. And so to make sure we're getting our capital recovered, that's why we're capped at 3 years. It's not perfect, and certainly makes things that don't have a defined payback, like software, extraordinarily difficult to figure out how to capitalize. I spent a whole lot of time committing myself to get software paid for, and sometimes I do just have to beg the people who run the operations budget, but then I'm back into the internal stakeholder engagement that we talked earlier. So, so those are sort of why the payback is written like it is.
And you also mentioned having the vendors be responsible for the incentives. Does that reason for that to help give you kind of more certainty when you're going for budgetary?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So unless it's just the whole project has to meet the payback, and if it only meets it with the incentives, then the incentives have to come off the cost of the project. We can't hope that incentives will show up, because we just can't write a check for a project that doesn't have that, where the check's too high and then do reimbursements. Like, it doesn't even really work like that. I mean, you do that from an operational perspective, but it shows up in the wrong bucket of money internally. Just believe me that that's true. So to keep things, I control a capital budget that's not universal real estate. That's just the way Tilray works. And so, things really need to, I don't like having to take rebate checks, basically.
Right. I just wanted to emphasize that point, because I think it's important. Okay.
Yes, so, and I will say that the vendors who win a lot of business with me are those who I really, really trust to navigate the incentive process. It is not easy. And, my hat's off to those who spend a lot of time, working with their utilities to make sure that they get paid, and that every T is crossed and I is dotted on those applications. It's certainly not simple.
I DWP is in the process of, and we'll be doing a future webinar with them, I think towards the end of the year, on their revamped programs, trying to make it similar, at least the smaller projects. Think about it, to reduce some of the documentation, but it requires a lot of coordination and attention to detail to make sure that money doesn't get left on the table, or you get delays that exacerbate that issue of where the money ends up when it finally comes. Okay. Great. So we talked about the process when you started, and I think you've kind of touched on answers to this question, but I'll just ask it again, because I like to hear the important points again. But what would you say are the key elements, of an effective strategy? I think you've talked about a few of them, but just say them again.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, and I'm sorry, there's trucks on here. The key elements of an effective strategy, I think, are to do not sort of more traditional projects where you know that you're going to get the savings and a little more of a well-oiled machine, but then also do more innovative work, because that exceeds the pipeline for the next year. So there's a lot of hand-wringing. Incidentally, are we going to pick all the low-hanging fruit? We won't be able to find efficiency projects. I've been doing this for 8 years, and everybody's like, oh, after 3 years, you won't be able to find anything anymore. It's not true. I believe innovation and human ingenuity, and you take programs getting better, and, you know, then that's important. But in order to be comfortable with scaling stuff like that, you have to pilot it. A lot of things like traditional lighting retrofits, irrigation upgrades, you know, that kind of thing. But then last year we launched the Core Innovation Lab to just really streamline the process through which we're piloting and try to get a lot more pilots going. So I really believe in the importance of clean tech and real estate. And the other important thing about a good technology sustainability strategy, in addition to having your own budget and a green lease, I think is also just having a lot of sort of humility and gratitude. These projects take a lot of time. They're by definition not business as usual. And I take a lot of engineer time and asset management time and full time management and everyone else to get them done. And I think one of the reasons we've been successful by Killer is I write a whole lot of thank you notes. And I spend a lot of time celebrating the work that people do. And I also spend a lot of time measuring results. It's really easy in sustainability to be like, hey, we have to get the next thing done and the next thing done and the next thing done. And, you know, nobody wants to give you more money to deploy projects unless you've shown that your projects were effective. So that's critically important as well. Our reporting requirements, you know, sort of force to do that. But it gets into a level of detail that I think makes everybody comfortable that the money is being spent correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so important to treasure the results. The Kilroy Innovation Lab, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So, this idea came about. I was at a conference in Chicago this year. It was like the worst weather. I love Chicago as a city, but my goodness, it was just like pouring, freezing rain. I was miserable, and like it was just me, a bunch of just like way older white men talking real estate. I did happen to go to a panel, and one speaker said, I work at the National Association of Realtors, which is, you know, this is the brokers, right? I mean, that's the organizing body for brokers. And I run our innovation lab. And it jaw dropped to the floor, like, what? You have an innovation lab? And he was talking about it. He said, well, if anybody wants to see it, come on over. It's just a couple blocks away. And I was like, great. So I went to go see the National Association of Realtors Innovation Lab. And then I realized, like this is a great idea because it's so hard for new clean tech to get into real estate. And what I'm going to provide is very clear frameworks for what we're looking for. But I also have like a built-in measurement and verification platform. A lot of new technology doesn't even know how to measure itself. Like I remember hearing pitch, and it was a really exciting technology, and I was like, great. So how do we make sure it works? And the response I got back was, oh, how should we make sure it works? Like, well, this is not great at all. Like I don't want. And so we have that ability now, and it also it formalizes things, and it also, to us, we have a lot of sort of big tech tenants, you know, Salesforce and LinkedIn, you know, and all them, and Dropbox, and it really shows our tenants with having to innovate constantly that we understand sort of what they're going through. What's really, really great thing about having a formal lab is that everybody wants to partner with you. So the other thing about the lab that is great is that the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator immediately came on board, and they were our first partner. We now have a second partner called Bill Edison out of New York. And so what they're doing is sort of curating the technologies. I hear pitches all day. People attempt to pitch new technology to me, you know, 5 times a day at least. And it's really hard to tell what's promising and what's not, and what's applicable to my buildings and what's not. But Lacey, the LA Clean Tech Incubator, and Bill Edison do a lot of that vetting, and they really sort of make sure that those technologies are appropriate for real estate. And so it's also really increased the quality of the projects we're doing.
I think that's almost a whole separate conversation that I'd love to.
Yeah, I'll just throw out there that like my dream is that every real estate owner has an innovation lab, and then we can pool our list of buildings, and then that way when a promising technology comes on, because everybody is different. Like I don't have anything that's like one multifamily building and like no industrial, and so there's some technologies that are really great for those asset types. I don't have them, and it would be just so great to be organized the way that we could, deploy those technologies elsewhere. So if you're a building owner on this and you also want an innovation lab, come to me and I'll tell you what to do.
At the Building Technology Showcase, August 10th.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I think you talked about this a little bit, but just, if there are other sustainability professionals on the phone, thinking, well, that's great. Kilroy is Kilroy. I'm at my company. How can I go about getting these resources? And maybe talk a little bit more about sort of the internal kind of process and how you went about getting resources that you needed.
Yeah, it's hard. I can only say for anybody who's in the boat of trying to get this started. I feel you. I have been there. Real estate was really not up with sustainability in mind, like it not maliciously or, without, like nobody's like, haha, I'm going to make it hard to do a retrofit. It's just that wasn't contemplated the way leases are traditionally written, the way that budgets are traditionally created. And so at Kilroy, we didn't have a budget, and when I was seeing my projects get slashed over and over again, we had to have I basically had to have a heart-to-heart with our CFO. And I want to just be clear that even though it was sort of tough to get projects through, Kilroy has for a very, very, very long time understood the value of sustainability. I mean, when our brokers and asset managers, it's why my position got created, want to talk, when we're talking to prospective tenants, we talk about the overall value of being in a Kilroy building. So it's not just the rent, but it's also what you're going to be paying in operating expenses. And our operating expenses are lower than those of our competitors. And so even if rent is higher or it's the same, whatever the rest of the market is, you're going to be overall paying less to be in a Kilroy building, for the level of getting a service that you want has been our argument that we've been able to back up. So, the idea of having lower operating expenses is something that is a core value at Kilroy. And so, recognizing that we had this disconnect between sustainability, we know it's important, we know our tenants want it, we want low operating expenses. Clearly, the way things are set up isn't making it happen. I was basically at the time using a whole lot of third-party financing that was really, really hard to try to convince people to do. Now, since then, we've third-party financing for things like solar and batteries, which for a variety of reasons it doesn't make sense to finance internally, which I can go into later. But, after like the third time, I was pitching some insane, external financing system. I think my CFO just got to the point where he said, how much money did the sustainability budget need so you just go away and stop bothering me with these ideas that are making all of our accountants go crazy. And so that's sort of the genesis of how the budget was created. So I think it's a lot of there's a bunch of things. One is there's a lot of things that are human capital, but not financial capital. And I have certainly done a lot of those projects. Some of them are available now. I mean, $90,000 of free lighting retrofits through DWP over the last couple of years. And those have been great, and those opportunities are available. They're going to take your time, but you have to do them. And I think that's one way to sort of demonstrate value. And then you say, look, those opportunities, they are limited. And then you can sort of incrementally do more. Like I wouldn't start out being like, we're going to do solar. I mean, you have to prove yourself. And I think I did a good job of sort of proving the value, which is why I was given, frankly, just the trust of being able to manage a budget. And that's, there's oversight, obviously. I can't just write a check just today for dinner. But you know, there's some trust there that the money is being spent well, and there's a lot of oversight to make sure that it is.
Right.
I will say on the flip side, one of the things I do just want to caution those who are starting out, and we've navigated this at Kilroy, but it's not easy, which is I think all sort of taught our internal operations, asset management, financial teams that everything that a sustainability person does has a payback, and so then when you get to things that don't have a payback, like software or it's like health, which just isn't the concept of a payback really isn't there, then you've kind of shot yourself in the foot because it isn't an ROI. And so I think it's always important to infuse these conversations into overall value. The metaphor I always use is like the Christmas trees in a lobby. And I say this as like a Jewish girl, but like it's important to have Christmas trees in the lobby during the holidays. Don't have the Christmas trees, the tenants are, get upset. What is the ROI of a Christmas tree? Nobody knows, but we know that it's important. And sustainability is the same. So that's something that is a conversation that is important to have often, because otherwise when you start doing things that are a little less, square peg, square hole, it gets difficult pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. And back to the heart-to-heart conversation you had with the CFO, and I did a webinar a couple weeks ago with Danters from Graz, and we were talking about, yeah, it's great. And we were looking at data from CoStar that showed how Energy Star and LEED buildings were performing, non-certified buildings, which I don't think is new news, but and we looked at Class B buildings, and I think and the same was true, and actually even stronger in Class B.
Yes,
the trend was even clearer, and I think it was because of that point that you made about low operating expenses, but charging the same rent, but you've got lower operating expenses. That's more compelling to a tenant. You're gonna have better occupancy and retention.
Yeah,
right.
I totally agree. It is a hard, it's definitely a hard conversation to have. I think the reasons that the budget is so constrained. I'd love to be able to just much cool technology out there that we're really able to take advantage of, but that just there isn't a place for it in budget, or it's like a software project that works really well, but I have to cancel it as soon as it's paid itself back. Not, you know what I'm saying? It's really hard to do ongoing commissioning in that way, and then sort of have to figure out a way to get it back in. To have the conversation after you've proven yourself, after sort of value is recognized, and then you don't overpromise what you can deliver. My major constraint is my time. These projects are just very, very, very time consuming to pull off, and I didn't ask for more than I could. I will also say that, for those who want to make this argument, it's not Kilroy. I very rarely have a great idea on my own. The Innovation Lab came from the realtors. In this case, it was somebody I deeply admired at Vornado who had sort of paved this path that is best practice to have a dedicated sustainability budget. And a bunch of the Australians did as well. And so when you can demonstrate that something is market, makes it a lot easier, and I promise you that this is the best practice. A lot of the Australian companies go one further, and then they have budgets for upgrades, and then for corporate sustainability, for software that helps you with reporting is a good example of something that would fall into that category. I don't have that kind of budget, and so I, again, have to allocate out of existing budgets when I want to do something like that. So I could just say they're not going to be the first. Nobody wants to stick their neck out for something like this. But in this case, you're not. Many people have done it for many years, and it's really great in terms of a way to draw additional value from your portfolio.
That's a great point to look internationally as well, because in other countries or like Australia or Israel, or they're very water constrained even more than we are.
Yeah.
They've really been innovating on this out of necessity for a long time, and have a track record with technologies that are maybe new to us, but they're not new.
Right. One of the pilots out of the Innovation Lab is a product I've been tracking for a couple years out of Australia, but they'd only recently come to the U.S. So some of these products in the Innovation Lab are like new. They're not really new because they're proven elsewhere.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing that I just want to point out is I hate to sort of say this, but I think it's an important note that like whether or not a technology works as optimally as it possibly could is like doesn't really even crack the top 5 that are important to me when I'm choosing a technology. I need to believe that it's going to work, but more important to me are, you know, as we've discussed earlier, understand the rebate process if you need one. You know, how is the customer service? You know, when we do a project, like we're getting married for some amount of time, and you know, we need to sort of believe that we're going to be taken care of. You have insurance, which is like a crazy thing I have to say, but I definitely went really far down the line with a project that would require a whole building water shutdown. They're like, oh, we don't have insurance. Is that important? He's like, what? My God. And so, you know, things like basic stuff like, if you're going to plug something into my building, is it UL lifted? You know, those sort of basic things are more, you know, that water project was really cool. I really wanted to do it. And I'd seen the data from the demonstrations, but I can't do a project where the other party doesn't have insurance. So like the fact that it worked or probably worked was less important than those other factors. So I think that can be sort of hard for technology to hear, and they're like, I have a product and it works great. And you're like, great, have solved all the other sort of business stuff that actually determines whether or not we're going to get it over the finish line. And the other thing is legal. These products are not easy to initiate, again, because real estate wasn't set up really with sustainability in mind. So not having a red line happy legal team is critical for getting projects done. I've had more than one project die when we were just, you know, the expected payback was then like, you know, what I would have saved in energy is what I was going to have to spend in legal fees to like get them to make our contract form work, and that has happened as well. So I think technology is great, but it really needs to understand its overall context.
That's a new metric, a savings to legal fee ratio. I like that.
Oh my God, I'm literally going through this right now on a project, and I want it so bad, and I love it dearly, but oh gosh. Yeah, and I have a battery deal as well that like, it's great. I'm excited to do it. We're in construction, but it's going to, I think the first like year or two of savings are just going to bang back the legal fees.
Wow. Talking a little bit more about, procurement. When you go out, and maybe I'll ask this about more of the kind of meat and potatoes traditional projects that you mentioned. You know, it's important to do some of those and balance that with pilots of more innovative technologies so you keep going. When you go out to bid on one of your more traditional projects, do you include like performance specifications in your RFP? And do you tell companies that, hey, you're going to have to use our paper to try to reduce some of the it's probably an issue with legalities on those types of projects. But so I guess the question is mainly about performance specs.
The spec is that in the contract it has to meet 3 years or less, and I will make a company insert that language. Unless it's something like that's for things that are like quote softer, you know, software stuff or like water stuff where things are hard to measure. This just happened to me earlier this year where like I couldn't get a water vendor. They're like, I'll back in a couple months. I was like, great, I need you to back on your contract, and they were like, no. If you did so much, why don't you just put it in writing? And I just want to be clear on why this happens. It's because a very unpleasant thing that I hope nobody has to go through, something called a lease audit, where the tenants say, we think you're overcharging us on capital expenses, and we want to see everything that you've been charging us for, and we're going to see whether or not you actually were allowed to charge us for it. And I had a building go through that, and I had, in one of my projects there, and I had all the paperwork and the contractual everything to back up that, no, this project was recovered from you over the payback period, and that meant that you're basically cost control, right, because your utility expenses were lower, but that's why I need that kind of thing. So for something like a lighting, it's easy, right, because it's like, here are the watts before, here are the watts after, here's the runtime, here's the energy cost. Something softer, the performance I need is I make the payback go into the contract.
And then you combine that with the M&V as well, and then you have the energy data to show as well.
Right. Yeah.
Great. Another question about. There's a question came in about the dedicated budget.
Yeah.
Is a kind of static amount year over year, or how, if at all, do the savings generated through the projects flow back or relate to that budget? Like, is there a way?
Yeah, it's not a revolving fund.
Okay.
That would be nice. I know there are companies that have that. That seems rare. The only universities seem to have those.
LA has one.
Yeah, LA has one. I know the University of Colorado in Denver does too. They have a great sustainability program, by the way, if you ever want to talk about that later. Those funds tend to be revolving, and I think it is because, as you can tell, like they are one budget, and I really cannot overemphasize the view of buckets of money. Like a capital budget, out of which something like a lighting retrofit is paid out of, is a different budget than the operating budget out of which electricity expenses are paid. So they don't happily talk to each other. So no, my budget is static. There are times, the only times it ever gets increased. I'm good at spending money. Spending people's money is so fun. So I say that, like, what I'm doing is something like, let's say, a retrofit. That's a lot easier than, say, building out a spec suite or redoing a lobby. Those projects have design and like 1,000 approvals, and like my stuff is pretty easy to deploy. I always have more projects that I would like to do than I can, and so it has happened. It didn't happen last year, but it happened the year before, where like a spec suite that was a large one, so it was going to be quite an expense, actually leased up. We had to build out the spec suite, and they were able to, read those monies to me so I get a window film project done that I'd been really asking for. So it increases only sort of when accidents happen, when a little bit frees up. And I really appreciate that Kilroy, in relationship with our operations team, knows that I'm a good person to, if anything extra comes up. I will say that I don't, I have been, I have had some sleepless nights or that kind of thing, because the rebate processes are so long that, you can, just getting your pre-approvals can take, I'll get extra funds in like September and have to spend it end of the year. And as everybody who's ever worked with utilities knows, it's like they turn around with a pre-inspection and an approval in that period of time. So I made a mistake once in other projects that I do. If extra monies show up that have to be spent by the end of the year are not related to incentives, just because. So I made all those poor the installers of window film work the week between Christmas and New Year's, because it was like December 24th. We got our approval. That was a tough one.
Wow.
And it might be sort of helpful to talk about the difference between, it's literally a completely different process when you're talking about things like solar and batteries. because those aren't the capital projects. We don't pay for them upfront, and that's because we are a real estate investment trust. The important thing about that corporate structure to know is that we don't pay corporate income tax, and a lot of renewables only really make sense if you're taking the investment tax credit, which we are unable to do, and we don't have a sort of a taxable REIT subsidiary. Some people just do it, they run it through their what's called a trust, but that's way in the weeds. Anyway, so those projects go through shocking amounts of internal review, because those are very long relationships, 25 years, 15 years, 10 years with those companies, and a lot of vetting and many meetings and people flying in. So I run those projects as well at Kilroy, and nothing I said about the capital budget is relevant to how those projects sort of come to be their own RFP, and really what gets those projects across are things like really the legal terms, because that's, over the long haul, what real estate, really cares about. Are you going to try to constrain my ability to sell my building? I can't deal with that. I need to be able to sell a building whenever I want to. So that is an example of something that doesn't really at all, fall into the narrative that I was saying earlier. We do have solar and battery projects. I have construction one in last November, and then I have battery projects with 2 different vendors pre-construction now.
Great. I have another question that came in.
So the question we just received is, do you have any experience that you can share around working across departments, specifically with an IT department or end user for integrating data with an app or third-party UX?
That's a great and difficult question. So basically, I have a good relationship with my relationship with our IT department is a little bit, I think, like good fences make good neighbors. None of my stuff goes behind the firewall. So all of the stuff, everything that I do, and I do a whole lot of software stuff, is able to be used as a pathway to breach the security of our systems. Both feel like that's the best way to do it. I have a great IT team who I like a lot, and I think the firewall makes us both, where they don't have to check with me and stuff, and I don't need to really check with them because everybody feels quite protected. So that's a good way to do internal stakeholder. And I think I'm a big believer in the firewall. I mean, everybody got freaked out when the Target hack happened through their energy efficiency software. So don't get into a security issue. I mean, data privacy is, I think, a little bit of I can't remember the term. It's like a straw man. Like, I don't think it's like Fort Knox data, but I will say that there is, I do have some tenants that do feel very strongly about the privacy of their data. And actually, in their case, I agree. Their data, the energy data, is quite private because if it were to leak, it would tell a competitor where ramping up operations or ramping down operations. And so with those folks, I do deal with data security issues, a whole lot of sort of stuff around that. But I would say for the most part, like what really got my teams on board, because it's so much time, is our reporting processes. So Kilroy does an annual sustainability report, and part of that report that report is externally assured, which means we pay money for an external auditor to verify all the data in the report, but also all the claims. And one of the things that is required in that process is that they interview like every senior leader at Kilroy every single year. And it was a big ask when we first started doing it. I was really nervous about it, but the results of doing it were fantastic. I never really had a much relationship with our risk management team. I love our risk management team, and that's really how I got to know them. It's one of these things like, do you approve this insurance? Do you approve that insurance? Do you approve this insurance? But our head of risk management is absolutely fantastic, and he has, sort of initiatives that relate to sustainability that we work together on. I mean, he's the person who was gung-ho on letting me install some beehives in Hollywood, which you would think a risk management person might not want to do. But so really, if it's possible to do those internal stakeholder collaboration exercises, that's great. So yeah, I actually recommend the external reporting process. I know other companies who have said the same thing about going through Dow Jones Sustainability Index and all of the different departments you have to ask for data, or responses, human resources, legal, the investor relations, and those conversations start. So I really find I'm a big believer in external reporting in a way to break barriers between departments.
Down as a key takeaway, because I think that's so important, and I have seen it with other organizations that we work with. That having that sort of external reporting just provides an opportunity for conversations that just otherwise happen in the course of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually really look to those interviews every year. Oh, and also, yeah, just a number of departments. We get to government affairs. I don't spend time like naturally relating to them, but they in terms of how we do our community engagement around development. I mean, I think we've really improved sustainability messaging around our development projects as a result of going through external reporting.
Right. It's like what are we doing on that exactly? Go back to what you made about budgets and just time, being a big limiting factor, just bandwidth to manage all of these things. So do you have how you prioritize all the different things that you're trying to get done with the limited time that you have? And if you have some sort of cycle or process, for gathering, like, okay, what are all the potential opportunities, things we could do this year, and look at all those and how you evaluate what you're going to spend time on and what you're going to pass on or what you're going to save for next year.
Right. So the best projects I originate. I'm not an engineer. I have an MBA. And I think an MBA is great because I spend a whole lot of time dealing with financial models and, how like solar is going to impact our accounting, which is to say I have the humility to know that I don't know how solar is going to impact our accounting, but I know who to ask and in what order. Right. So I would much prefer engineers to projects. So here's what we do at Kilroy. At the beginning of every single year, I have a call with every single property team. We have 29. So and them manages a portfolio of between like one giant building to I think the largest one has like 17 buildings or something like that. We're about 110 building-ish portfolio, depending on how you count what's in development and that kind of thing. So I have a call at the beginning of every year with each team, and we go over last year's projects and how they went and the overall performance on energy and water. So everybody's upfront on and accounted for, and if there are discrepancies, or unexplained increases or decreases, I want to know about it because I'm going to have to be responsible for those when reporting season's around. And when we say, I want to know what projects you want to do or we have opportunities for this year, next year, and the following year, because we're on a 3-year cycle. We budget 3 years in advance, and then we're obviously revising our budgets constantly. So that is an opportunity where everybody really has to think about they might want to do. So a good example is a building of mine. They're like, oh yeah, we really, I think last year they took our call like, okay, we really need window film on this particular side. The tenants are heating up a bunch and they're uncomfortable, and I know we're spending too much on cooling. So great. So I put in a budget allocation for that for this year. We're on a fiscal year thing, so my budgets are due actually at the end of next month. And then, this year rolls around, they're like, yep, we still definitely want to do the window film, and then the money's already allocated, so then I can get quotes and get it done. That's the way we do it. I would much prefer an engineer to come to me with a project because they know their building. You know, I don't know their buildings. And what happens is if I hear of a pitch that's exciting, and the immediate is, okay, I talk to my VP of engineering who sort of oversees engineering across all of our portfolio, and we think of buildings where we think there could be an opportunity, and then we reach out to an engineer to see if they agree.
Right.
But
based on what they said in the kickoff meeting.
Yeah, I don't like telling people what to do. Now, you know, with certain things like solar and batteries, you know, yes, in that case, the vendors that we've already done a major RFP and chosen our vendors because that was really difficult, and done preliminary, you know, review of which buildings would qualify. But then, you know, after the RFP was submitted, then they went back and did much more detailed site visits to see which buildings were even eligible. And that's sort of how those particular buildings got chosen. But for the most part, it's, you know, I prefer it to be engineer, it's not anyway, and I prefer it to be engineer originated.
Great. Yeah, makes sense. So engineers know the buildings and are hearing, and the property teams are hearing for tenants as well. And then you're hearing pitches, you know, that might match with some of those needs or opportunities that surface through those conversations with the property.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It's only a very sophisticated tenant. It's like, I need this sustainability project. You know, tenants sort of want, it's I get like a service like we provide, like the way that we provide, you know, like a nice office environment. Like they expect the Kilroy building to be sustainable, but like I'm the building expert, not them. So we have to figure out what the best way is to make those buildings sustainable. The other thing we like, I really can't overemphasize, like if you want successful sustainability programs, like love your engineers. We did a program, and you can find it on our website or find me if it's difficult to locate, where we made every year sort of focus on one group that really helps us on sustainability. And so one year was our engineers, and I made everybody a baseball card with their staff. You know, so like, here are the big projects that they've done, and here are their overall energy reductions since they started at Kilroy, and like, and your certifications, and like, it was sponsored. So I was kind of worried about it, like, you know, because engineers tend to be kind of shy as a profession. Like, you don't get into engineering like for the degree. And they really loved it. Like, I was getting responses like, you appreciate me more than my wife, and it's so great to know I work for a company that, you know, appreciates the value of what we do. And we dropped energy use that year by like twice the expected amount. I think it's because it really, it like did and reminded the guys to like really look for opportunities. And so just team engagement is just a really great way to make people excited to embrace new technology, because it's hard. Technology's hard. It's if it often doesn't work at the right time. Really having a good relationship is the way to get it, you know, get through the tough times.
Great. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you, Sarah, so much, and thanks everybody for all of the great questions. I think this was an awesome discussion, and really frame the event that's coming up, where Sarah will part
we can't wait.
The panels. Yes. So thank you, everybody. Again, we will be sending out the recording and slides, and this is a link to register. You may have also seen emails from us on this, but we're a few weeks out and starting to fill up. So looking forward to seeing everybody in a few weeks, and on our next webinar next month, we'll focus on the energy water nexus, how shifting towards more local sources of water helps to reduce the carbon intensity and energy use associated with that. Some new resources that we've developed in collaboration with DWP and MET. So thanks again, Sarah, and happy birthday, and everybody have a great afternoon.
Thanks for having me. Bye, everybody.